September 25th, 2025. I unbox my third CDJ 2000 Nexus 2. I finally received this, so let's open it. Put it on my setup next to the other two. Let's install it. For now it's gonna live here and start testing every single button like any reasonable person does when they get new gear. And that is when I found out that the entire board with the tempo adjust, master tempo, beat sync and jog mod is just not working. Needs a complete cleanup, that's for sure. But nothing seems to be broken, at least. What followed was almost a full year of ultrasonic cleaners, soldering irons, Frankenstein CDJs, buttons I accidentally ordered from Australia and had airshipped to my house, a connector that was simply unplugged the whole time, a shortless debugging session in a very, very hot studio, and more moments of genuine despair than I am comfortable admitting on camera. 3 CDJs, tens of hours of footage. One video. I'm Veldema, and let's dive in. Let me set the scene properly. I now own 3 CDJ 2000 Nexus 2s, which are not the industry standard anymore, but are still widely used and also, as it turns out, moderately expensive paperweights if the buttons just stop working. I bought the first 2 CDJs from a guy here in Quebec for a great price, let's say, knowing that some of the buttons weren't fully working and the jog screen were not working too. More on the price I paid at the end of the video, by the way. I bought the third one a few months later on eBay at basically the same price as my 2 broken ones, shipping and taxes included. So it was a great deal. It also wasn't supposed to be broken at all. So I bought it, and I found out that it had a whole board that was unresponsive. The tempo adjust, master tempo, beat sync, jog mod, all of it just dead. So I contacted the company that is sold it to me via eBay, and they offered 3 choices. They could issue me a full refund and have the faulty unit shipped back. They could send me a set of boards to replace, and I could obviously keep the existing boards, but they don't work, so anyways. Or they could give me a partial refund of dollars. Didn't hear that, did you? I didn't want to send the unit back because it would just be such a waste of time and money for everyone involved. So I crossed this solution off my list. Then I looked into replacing the entire board and decided very quickly that I was not going to do that. Because the buttons felt mushy and gross, which is actually the technical term. I was pretty convinced that they just were not actually broken, just incredibly dirty. Years of club use will do that to a piece of gear. So I took the money, and my plan was to clean everything. And the tool I landed on for this was an ultrasonic cleaner, which is the machine people use to clean jewelry and watches by vibrating liquid at a very high frequency to dislodge dirt from surfaces. My reasoning was, if it works on a Rolex, it will probably work on a PCB, which is either very smart or very stupid, depending on how you look at it and how you look at me. And I wasn't sure which side I was on at that time either. Thus, I bought an ultrasonic cleaner online. I did regret buying the smaller model almost immediately, but the bigger one was just way too expensive and would have defeated the entire purpose of trying to save money. So, smaller it was. Now, the obvious issue with an ultrasonic cleaner and electronics is the liquid. The machine heats up to about 50 degrees Celsius, and my first instinct was to use isopropyl alcohol, because that is basically what you use when you clean PCB or any electronic properly. No residue, no rust, no short circuits. The problem is that alcohol plus heat plus a machine generating vibrations near electronics is a combination that has the potential to cause a very exciting and very unwanted fire. So I came up with what I will call, generously, a compromise. I put the PCB inside a sealed plastic bag with the alcohol, then I submerge the whole bag in distilled water inside the cleaner. Yes, I know. The alcohol does the cleaning through the bags and the water absorbs the heat, and theoretically, nothing catches fire. Safe? Probably not 100%. Good enough? Well, apparently, yes. I even tested whether the ultrasonic effect was actually passing through the plastic bag by using the classic aluminum foil trick, where you put a piece of foil that you just put like in a bowl in the liquid and just run the machine. And if it works, then you end up with a ton of little tiny holes punched through the foil from the cavitation. It worked. The video quality isn't good enough, so you cannot really see it, but trust me, it was very satisfying. Before I show you the cleaning, I want to take a few minutes to explain why I am doing the things the way I do it in this video. Because I think the reasoning is pretty interesting and it will make everything that follows make a lot more sense. You've heard me mention PCBs a few times already, and PCB stands for printed circuit board. If your electronics were a human being, like me, yes, I know I'm a human being, a PCB would basically be everything that is under the skin. The brain of the device live on a PCB, the sensors live on a PCB, and all the connections between them are built directly into the board itself. The clever part is that those connections are not visible wires running all over the place. They are conductive traces embedded inside the layers of the board itself. Sometimes up to, I don't have enough figure, but 12 layers deep, all stacked on top of each other like a really big highway interchange where you can somehow fit everything into the same space without anything crossing incorrectly. It is kind of magical when you think about it. Now, why does this matter for cleaning? Well, because a PCB is fundamentally just hardened resin with conductive traces and soldered components on top of it, or inside it. And as long as you do not have something water sensitive on the board itself, like the jog screen, for example, you can actually wash it. The problem is what you wash it with. Tap water is out. Tap water has minerals in it, and minerals conduct electricity. So even after the water has completely evaporated and dried, those minerals stay behind on the board itself, and they can form an invisible bridge between 2 points that are sometimes absolutely not supposed to be connected. That is called a short circuit, where the current takes an unintended path instead of the correct one. And it can just fry components instantly because some parts of the board are simply not designed to receive certain voltages or currents. So instead of water, the go-to solution for PCB cleaning is isopropyl alcohol. Alcohol itself is a very poor conductor, meaning it will not short your board instantly at least, and most importantly, it leaves zero residue when it dries, and it dries extremely fast. We're talking a few seconds. You can literally watch it evaporate. That's perfect. The next best option, if alcohol is not working well enough for a deep clean or if, like in this situation, it's too dangerous, is distilled water. Distillation removes all the minerals and impurities that make tap water dangerous for electronics. So you get the cleaning power of water without the short-circuit risk. However, the downside is that it still takes much longer to dry than alcohol, and you need to be very patient about it, which I will demonstrate shortly. And the ultrasonic cleaner? That is just the delivery mechanism. Instead of scrubbing a board manually with the toothbrush and hoping for the best, the ultrasonic cleaner uses very high frequency. They are really annoying to hear. It uses really high frequency vibrations to create millions of tiny bubbles inside the liquid that collapse on contact with surfaces and physically dislodge dirt from places a brush could never reach. This is called cavitation, and it is the same effect that makes the aluminum foil test work, where the collapsing bubble punch microscopic holes through the foil. It is also why it works so well on watch movements and jewelry, because it gets into every tiny little gap without any mechanical contact at all. It's perfect for my use here, as I cannot clean the inside of a button without breaking it. So the water and/or the alcohol goes inside the tiny button, cavitation and heat breaks down the dirt and the accumulation of things inside the button and spit it out of the button. And when it evaporates, it leaves a clean inside of something that shouldn't be possible to clean. That's nice. The only complication is that the machine can heat up to about 50 degrees Celsius, and heated alcohol is a fire risk in an enclosed space full of electronics. Which is why I came up with the plastic bag method. That's pretty roundabout method, but it works, and why I eventually decided to use just distilled water directly instead. But we'll get to that. Now, back to the cleaning. I heated the distilled water to about 40 degrees just to be safe. Put the plastic bag with the tempo adjust board and some isopropyl alcohol inside and run the cleaner. I want you to imagine the most satisfying things you have ever seen come out of something that looked clean on the outside. The amount of grime that came floating out of that board was genuinely impressive. Years of alcohol spills, skin cells, just dust, sweat, and whatever else accumulates inside a professional DJ player over a career of club gigs, all just separating from the board and floating away. I did the same for the eject board, then the main board, where I still wished I had bought the bigger ultrasonic cleaner, because the main board is a bit weird shaped and it could barely fit, and I could only really get the edges of the board cleaned properly. And then, because I had already thrown the notion of care and caution at my balcony and watched it fade away slowly in the darkness, I just decided to plunge the main board directly into the distilled water without the bag at all. No alcohol, no bag, just simply a $500 minimum electronic board submerged in water. My exact thought process at that moment was, what could go wrong? Which is the kind of reasoning that either works perfectly or costs you thousands of dollars. Well, it worked perfectly. Way better than the bag method, actually. I just made absolutely sure to let everything dry completely before touching anything electrical again. I put the boards in the oven at the lowest temperature possible to help the water evaporate fully a bit quicker. Because the last thing you want after all of this is a short circuit from residual moisture. As I said earlier, distilled water won't leave any residue, but it's still water, and water conducts electricity. Then came the more satisfying part, let's say, the physical cleaning. I removed all of the buttons, the jog wheel, and let everything soak in hot soapy water for a few minutes. it works like a charm. Cotton swab with isopropyl alcohol for the cracks and edges. And when I put the cleaned board back in with the cleaned button, the difference was immediately obvious. Clicky, responsive, tactile buttons instead of the mushy, gross one I had started with. I was a happy man for about 20 minutes. Because when I tested everything, some buttons worked and others still did not. Before we get into the part where everything gets more complicated, before it gets hopefully better, spoiler, it gets better. If you enjoy this kind of content, like repairs, gear teardowns, DJ culture, and me taking and making questionable decisions with really expensive equipment, then make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment down below. People keep joining the channel, and that still genuinely surprises me every time. So if you're already here, thank you for real. And if you're new, welcome! You have arrived right as things are about to get considerably more painful for me. Also, if you want to support what I'm building here directly, like this, for example, my Patreon is linked below, and that is what lets me spend more time on this instead of doing some sensible with my weekends. Alright, time to figure out exactly what is broken and why. After the cleanup, I started to make a list of everything that was wrong across all 3 CDJs, because I had already been doing things somewhat, let's say, reactively until this point, and I needed to actually understand the full scale of what I was dealing with. CDJ number 1 had a broken screen with non-functioning touch. 2 call button not working, the delete button not working, and the entire jog mode, beatsync, and tempo section still misbehaving. CDJ number 2 had the sync button not working, and 2 of the hotkey buttons are dead. At least were dead. CDJ number 3 had the search button on the right not working, the memory button unreliable, the jog mode button, sync, master, a second memory issue, the LED call buttons, and the tempo fader needed a bit of greasing. And finally, my DJM mixer still has a broken color effects potentiometer on top of all of that. That's a lot. Don't swear, was a lot. My theory up until this point was that maybe I did not need to replace entire PCBs for all 3 CDJs. Maybe, just maybe, I needed to replace the individual buttons themselves, which are dramatically cheaper and, crucially, do not require to spend money I do not want to spend. I ordered everything I thought I needed from eBay, including all of the buttons and a screen touch panel. I also ordered a few extra of everything just in case, which turned out to be a very good instinct. Everything arrived on time. And I made one relatively small mistake, which I will get to shortly, and which still makes me a little embarrassed. Before getting the soldering iron out, I did something smart for once, which was to first just physically swap PCBs between CDJs to try and isolate whether the problem was the button itself or something else on another board. Hear me out. If a button does not work in one CDJ, but works in another CDJ, then the button is fine and another board in this CDJ has a problem. If the button fails in both, then the button is the problem. That's simple diagnostic logic, very useful. That's a software engineer for you, debugging is my specialty. Then came the screen replacement. I have to be honest about this one because it was entirely my own fault. When I was cleaning the CDJ, I misplaced a component near the screen during reassembly. It got stuck in a weird position. I did not notice before screwing the screen back in, and I cracked the glass touch panel. The LCD underneath, hopefully, Not hopefully, but I'm really glad the LCD underneath was perfectly fine. It was just the touch panel, which is just a simple layer of glass that was shattered. Entirely preventable, internally only. So I did that to the order list as well.
Clémentine, ça fonctionne! Mais il y en a quand même qui fonctionnent. Ça sent le cramé, non? Le touch, il fonctionne.
Then came the soldering. Now, I have been soldering PCBs for about 10 years now. So I wasn't scared of the soldering job itself. But desoldering and resoldering buttons on the CDJ 2000 Nexus 2, a piece of equipment that cost thousands of dollars, is a slightly different feeling than soldering something where you are not worrying about breaking an expensive device. I was a bit nervous. I desoldered and resoldered about 10 buttons in total. Most of them are through-hole components, meaning they have two metal legs that go straight through the board, which is the easiest type to work with. You hit the joint, remove the existing solder with my orange vacuum thingy, remove the old component without breaking anything else, clean the hole, insert the new one, solder it in. Straightforward if you've done it before. And it worked. First attempt. I was so relieved. Then came the bank change button, which was different and considerably more annoying. That one button is an SMT component, or surface mount technology, meaning it sits on the surface of the board rather than going through it. It has 4 legs, all surface mounted, all needing to be precisely aligned and soldered in place without bridging two parts of the PCB together. Trickier, more delicate, more stressful. I had ordered 5 of them, or so I thought. What actually arrived was 1. And when I checked my order history on eBay, I had in fact only ordered a single button and had been billed for 1. Because at some point I just canceled an order and placed a new one, and somewhere in the process I miscounted. Fine, I thought. I only needed 1 right now anyway. What I did not really immediately remember was where it was shipping from. Australia. I ordered 1 single SMT button from Australia and had it air shipped to my house in Canada. 1 button, international air freight. The shipping cost me 6 times the price of the button. However, thanks to the seller, who probably saw the button to shipping price ratio, told me that he could lower the shipping cost by not having a tracking number. For a known seller on eBay with a $3.5 item, I didn't risk a ton not having a tracking number. I could have lost about $10 anyway, or I could have saved almost $20 not having the tracking. So I took the chance, and obviously the button arrived. I soldered it in after a bit of struggle with the alignment, and it worked. The keyboard on one of the CDJs was in a different situation from everything else. It was not a dirty button problem, and it was not a bad solder problem. The copper traces on the board itself were damaged, meaning the electrical pathways that connect the components were physically broken. You cannot just clean your way out of that, and you cannot replace a button to fix it. The solution was to bridge the broken traces with wires. Basically, throwing the concept, the core concept of a PCB, right back where it started. Wires. Not the most elegant repair in the world, and not technically the right type of wire for the application, but electrically it does exactly the same job, and it worked perfectly. Sometimes the right answer is the one that actually solves the problem. Right? I mounted everything back together, powered it on, and the jog wheel screen was not working anymore. I spent some time cleaning things up, then came up with what I call the Frankenstein method, which is where things get interesting and also where I started making even more mistakes. The idea was to swap parts between CDJs systematically. So, if the jog screen works in CDJ1 but not CDJ2, the problem is not the screen, it is something in CDJ2. If it fails in both, the screen is the issue. Logical, methodical, and absolutely brutal on the internal connectors. Here is something worth understanding about CDJ internals. The different boards inside are connected by flat ribbon cables, flexible connectors that allow signal to travel between sections of the unit itself without the whole unit being one large, very fragile PCB. This is actually a good design choice. It means you can replace individual boards without replacing everything. And it gives you some extra flexibility when troubleshooting. However, those connectors are not designed for repeated insertion and removal. Buttons like a mouse click are rated for hundreds of thousands, even millions of actuations or clicks. These ribbon connectors are probably rated for generously a few dozen removals before the contacts starts to wear or the locking mechanism becomes unreliable. I hate to say it, but I stopped counting my insertions and removals sometime very, very far ago at a conservative estimate. Yes, I damaged some of them. The fix is relatively straightforward. Take a precision knife and carefully carve away the plastic insulation at the damaged point to reveal the copper trace underneath. It takes patience, but it is not difficult. What it is time consuming. And it is entirely avoidable if you are more careful than I was. Since the beginning, one of the CDJs was throwing an error code, E9101 or E9101, which means mechanical timeout on the CD reader. Now, nobody uses the CD reader on a CDJ 2000 Nexus 2 anymore. Ouch. The whole point of the unit is USB and network linking. But an error is still an error, and I am not the kind of person who can ignore an error code on a device I am supposed to be repairing and maybe selling in the near future. So, in the year that I had the unit, I removed the entire CD assembly multiple times, which is on itself its own adventure. I checked every component I could find multiple times, compared it against the service manual diagrams, and could not find a single thing wrong with it. No obvious damage, no worn parts, no dirty laser assembly, nothing. The mechanism looked completely fine. Now, when I did my solders, I checked the diagrams more carefully and noticed that under the CDJ, like literally under the CDJ, not under the board of the CDJ, there was a small panel I had not opened yet, a separate compartment on the bottom of the unit with some connectors hidden inside. Maybe that was it. Maybe a broken connector, a loose cable, or some residue. So I removed the cover. The connector was unplugged. It was just unplugged, sitting there, not connected to anything, looking at me like that. Stupid. I spent an embarrassing amount of time diagnosing a mechanical timeout error on a CD mechanism that had an unplugged connector the entire time. Every single check I ran, every component I inspected, every diagram I cross-referenced, all of it completely unnecessary because a cable was simply not plugged in. I went and showed my girlfriend immediately. Not because she particularly needed to know about CDJ connector states, but because I had been mentioning this art for her, not for her, but to her, for months. And I needed her to understand the full scale of what just happened. Truth be told, she found it funnier than I did. but it's fine. I plugged the cable back in, reassembled everything I had taken apart to diagnose a problem that did not exist, powered it on, and it worked perfectly, obviously, because there had never been anything wrong with the CD mechanism in the first place. Okay, this is the chapter I was not entirely looking forward to writing, but it is part of the story, and leaving it out would make the whole thing feel dishonest. At some point in the middle of all of this, meaning at the beginning of the year, I stopped. Not in a planned, deliberate way, more in a way where you walk away from a thing for a day, and the day becomes a week, and the week becomes several weeks. And then you've not touched it in a very, very long time, and the studio is an absolute mess, and you still have not mixed because the CDJs you bought are not working, and you love mixing, and you genuinely miss it. I have not done a live stream since the 8th of February of this year, 2026. My last mix was the 22nd of March, 2026. Almost 5 months without touching my CDJs. And I still haven't made a proper mix yet. There were moments during this project where I was convinced I had permanently damaged equipment worth thousands of dollars. The short circuit incident where I accidentally bridged two wires together and genuinely thought I had killed a CDJ. The repeated connector damage. The jog screen that kept flickering on and off no matter what I tried. These are the events I had to deal with. Every time something did not work after I had just fixed something else, it felt like the project was getting larger instead of smaller. Well, I did not lose the money. Nothing yet. I did not lose the money yet. Nothing was permanently destroyed yet. But that feeling of, I have made this worse and I cannot see how to make it better, is not a very pleasant place to spend a lot of time. And I spent a fair amount of time there. I also really miss mixing, which sounds like a small thing, maybe for you, but actually the thing that eventually got me back to the studio and back to the project was this. Because at some point, the frustration of not being able to mix outweighed the frustration of facing the broken CDJs again. Bit ironic. When I finally came back to it properly, I decided to do two things at the same time. Fix the remaining CDJ problems and fix the studio itself, because at this point the space was a small mess and I could not think clearly in it. One thing I had been wanting to do for a long time was properly mount the TV above the DJ setup. Not above, but in front at least. Well, I got some MC screws and some steel cables I had laying around, and the plan was essentially to hang the TV from the table like a piece of art instead of screwing it inside the table, if it makes any sense. I put the M6 screws into the TV's mounting holes, ran the steel cables as flexible anchors to the structure behind the table, and it worked incredibly well. Doing it alone was a workout. I had not signed up for that afternoon, but the result was exactly what I had imagined. Cable management followed, reorganizing everything under the table, the Ethernet hub that links all three CDJs and the DJM together for BeatSync found a proper home hidden from sight right there. The setup started looking like a real studio again, rather than the site of an ongoing disaster.
Yay. Nice. I'm so happy it works. It's freaking hot here. It's 26 degrees. But there is no wind. Yeah. It works. I'm happy. It's gonna be sick when I'm gonna go live streaming. It's gonna be like this. I could put it even higher. Like what's making me avoiding, like put this like right here so that it's even higher.
And with the studio sorted, I could think clearly enough to finally tackle the last remaining problem. The jog wheel screen of one of the CDJ that had been flickering on and off randomly for what felt like forever. It was a very hot day in Quebec. And yeah, I have AC in my home, but the studio is at the far end of the AC and I have a ton of electronics here. I have a NASA computer, 1, 2, 3 screens, 1, 2, 3 CDJs, a DJM, 2 studio lamps, it's the two studio speakers. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. So I have a ton of electronics here and it gets hot. Like right now, it's 26.5 degrees without any wind on me. So I'm pretty hot. I know. Anyways, after a brief consensus with myself, I decided to dedicate my entire afternoon to this one problem. Not the AC problem. The jog wheel screen problem. I also decided it was too hot to wear a shirt and I was pretty sure I couldn't fix the problem, which in hindsight I should have anticipated would end up in the videos, but here we are. Anyway, the jog's wheel screen was flickering, not in a consistent pattern, not triggered by any specific input, just randomly turning on and off. I had already spent hours with the multimeter trying to isolate whether it was a power issue, a signal issue, or something physical on the board itself. I had left the board powered during some of those sessions to monitor voltage levels in real time, which is both necessary and extremely stressful given that it means working on live electronics. At one point, I even accidentally shorted 2 wires together and was absolutely convinced I had destroyed the board. I had not. But it taught me to be more careful. The work I did with the multimeter eventually ruled out a power delivery problem. The voltage was correct everywhere. So it was not the power supply. It was not the main board. It had to be something physical on the screen board itself. So I removed the board and started pressing on different areas of it while it was connected and running, watching the screen for any response. And at a specific spot on the board, pressing changed the screen state. On, off, perfectly correlated with where I was pressing.
Oh! 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 Yeah!
A broken solder joint. A solder on the ground connection of the screen where the pin had partially separated from the board. Under normal conditions, the pressure of the board sitting in its normal position kept the connection just barely made. But if anything caused the board to flex slightly, like picking it up or pressing the jog screen, like the jog wheel, the connection broke and the circuit opened and the screen went off. Completely random from the outside, completely logical once you knew what you were looking for.
If it's just this, I'm like moving my brain out of my brain. Okay, let's go do this quickly.
So I put a short on. I was going to solder this on camera and I needed to look at least approximately professional for that. As I always do. Approximately professional. I heated the soldering iron, reflowed the ground joint, let it cool and plugged the board back in. The screen came on. Stayed on, did not flicker once. I sat there for a moment and did not say anything. Then I said several things, some of which needed to be blipped.
No way! No way! Muscle!
I powered everything down, ran the full diagnostic by pressing tempo and memory to cycle through the self-check, and went through all 3 CDJs buttons by buttons.
Jog touch switch plus the screen. jog touch switch plus the screen, jog touch switch plus the screen. Well, there is still the small LED here, but I don't have it, so yeah, whatever. No freaking way. It was just this. A simple solder point that was used, basically. No way! Do we have 3 fully working CDJs now? Alright, I have to test everything.
3 CDJs, all working. All but a handful of very minor buttons that are so rarely used they barely count, and those are just going to need a bit more cleaning or a replacement at some point, but they are not urgent and will be done for the next video. The memory queues and call functions are not something I use at all in a regular mix, so they can wait. The studio is cleaner. I even replaced my cables right there because they were just sticking out, so it's all RCA now. The TV is mounted. The Ethernet hub as a home. The setup looks exactly what I always wanted it to look like. Almost. I still need to paint this black. Was it worth it? In terms of pure hours per dollar saved, I'm pretty sure not. In terms of what I learned about CDJ internals, soldering, diagnostic, and the specific joy of fixing something expensive that you use and love, absolutely yes. How much did I save? Well, to know this, you'll have to subscribe. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know, I'm sorry. Hear me out, because I'll get into the details in the next video coming out in a few weeks, where I will finish fixing up my CDJs and my mixer, my DJM mixer, and where I will make a pretty cool spreadsheet, a big spreadsheet, with everything that it cost me and if it was worth it or not. Anyway, I can mix again, which was the whole point. If I have time this weekend, I'll do the rest of the repairs so that the video comes out earlier and update you on my social media. So stay tuned about that. If you have any question about any of the repairs that I did in this video, the ultrasonic cleaning process, the soldering, the connector repairs, or even the diagnostic methods, anything at all, well, drop them in the comment section below and I will answer what I can at least. And if you've done similar repairs on CDJs or any other gear, just let me know. I really want to know what your experience was like, because I have a feeling I am not the only person who has gone through something like this. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel. And I will see you in the next one. I'm Veldema. And remember, be creative, be inventive, and always, always check if the connector is plugged in before you take the whole thing apart. See ya!